Actually, it's 12:02, so we're going to get started. And so, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning to some. Welcome to today's Grow session. We are so pleased to welcome participants from near and far. My name is Laura Tarlin. I'm one of the program and relationship directors, and I have the privilege of working here at Tometo Hebrew College, your home for quality adult learning. I didn't mean to make that sound like an ad, but we are. Grow sessions are designed to be opportunities for participants to gather, reflect, observe, and wrestle with a variety of interesting and relevant topics. During today's session, we will have Jody Kipnis, who is the co-founder and president and CEO of the Holocaust Legacy Foundation and the driving force behind the Holocaust Museum in Boston, which is opening pretty soon in 2026. We are in 2026. So this is the first museum that is opening in more than 2 decades in Boston. I was fortunate to meet Jody Kipnis after her transformative journey to Poland in 2018. She shared with me that she was going to create this. She had the vision and she was thinking about it. And I was like, And here we are almost 8 years later. And she is going to be sharing with us her vision of building a Holocaust education as a vehicle for civic responsibility and democratic resilience. She's an entrepreneur and a nonprofit leader. Jody serves on the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Commission on Antisemitism and speaks nationally on moral courage, leadership, memory, and confronting hate through education. So before I turn it over to her, I just have a few housekeeping rules. Whatever. Please keep your microphone muted so we aren't disturbed by any background noise. And feel free to ask questions in the chat box. And at the end, we will share them with Jody and she'll be able to answer the questions. So with my pleasure, I am so excited to introduce all of you to Jody Kipnis.
Hi, whoops, I'm not on mute. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much to Hebrew College and to Mead community for inviting me to join you today. It truly is an honor to spend this hour with you. Before I start with a slideshow presentation, I want to begin by saying something that I feel is really important. I want you all to know I am not a historian and by training, and I'm not an academic. I'm a citizen, a mother, an entrepreneur, as you heard, and someone who became truly deeply troubled by what I was seeing happening in our world. And I came to believe that Holocaust education is not simply about preserving just memory. It's about protecting democracy, protecting humanity, and really asking difficult questions about who we're all becoming. So today I want to not talk only about the Holocaust itself, but about moral courage and why I believe Holocaust education has become one of the most urgent civic responsibilities of our time. I also want this conversation to feel human, not like a lecture and not like a history class, but like an honest reflection about the world we are living in right now. My professional life actually began very differently than where I am today. For over 20 years, I worked in the dental field and tapped into a few entrepreneurial opportunities while I was raising my children. And during those years, I became involved in Jewish and non-Jewish nonprofit leadership and community work. But Holocaust education, it was never originally in my path. Everything changed, as Laura mentioned, in 2018 for me. That year I traveled to Poland, and like many people, I thought I understood the Holocaust. I had learned about it in school at a very, very young age, way before I was a teenager. I would guess somewhere between 8 and 10 years old. And honestly, I avoided it for much of my life because it scared me. What I mean by that is my earliest memories of Holocaust education were images of liberation. So, as you can imagine, emancipated bodies, mass graves, starvation, human suffering at a scale that felt impossible to process as a child. And I think for many people, Holocaust education begins there with the horror. But what I came to realize like later in life is that if we only understand the Holocaust through images of death, we miss the far more uncomfortable question. How did human beings actually get there? How did ordinary societies slowly normalize cruelty, division, propaganda, and dehumanization long before the camps? That realization changed the way I understood Holocaust education entirely. But being physically present in those spaces changed something really deep inside of me. Standing on the grounds of Auschwitz, where human beings were stripped not only of their lives, but of their dignity, their identity, and their humanity, it affected me in a way I was not prepared for. And what struck me most was not only the scale of the horror, it was the realization that none of it happened all at once. The Holocaust did not begin with concentration camps. It began with language, with division, with propaganda, with conspiracy theories, with the slow normalization of hate. And I remember leaving Poland thinking, how could one of the most educated societies in the world descend into this? How did ordinary people become desensitized to cruelty? And how did neighbors stop seeing one another as human beings? And then another question followed me home. Could something like this happen again? Not exactly the same way, but through the same patterns of human behavior. That question changed the course of my life, and eventually it led me to help create the Holocaust Museum Boston. So I'm going to now share my slideshow presentation with all of you. If you can give me 1 minute just to pull that up. Let's see, here we go. Can everybody see that okay? Laura, can you just give me a thumbs up? Okay, great. Let me go. Here we go. So when many people hear the words Holocaust education, they assume it's primarily about studying the past. But I believe Holocaust education is equally about understanding the present because the conditions that allowed hatred to grow are not gone. We are living in a time of deep polarization. We have rising antisemitism, growing distrust in institutions, conspiracy driven thinking, and a digital environment where emotionally charged misinformation spreads faster than the truth. And what concerns me the most is how quickly human beings can begin seeing one another not as individuals, but as categories. That is where dehumanization begins, not with violence, with language, with simplification, with fear, with us versus them. One of the things I think often about is how human beings absorb information today. Algorithms reward outrage. Social media platforms are designed to keep us emotionally activated. Nuance disappears, complexity disappears. And suddenly, people stop listening to understand, and they only begin listening to react. The Holocaust matters today not because history repeats itself exactly. History never repeats itself perfectly, but human behavior is what repeats itself. Fear repeats itself, scapegoating repeats itself, silence repeats itself, and moral courage must repeat itself too. So one of the central ideas that we explore, or the visitor will explore in Holocaust Museum Boston, is the fragility of democracy. Democracy is often treated as permanent, but it is not permanent. It is fragile, and history shows us that democracies really disappear overnight. They erode gradually, slowly, incrementally, through normalization, through fear, through exhaustion, through attacks on truth, through distrust in institutions, and through division. And through the willingness of ordinary people to look away because confronting what is happening feels uncomfortable or inconvenient. One of the most dangerous things about democratic erosion is that it often feels subtle while it is happening. People adapt, they rationalize, they compromise little by little, and over time, behaviors that once would have felt shocking become normalized. That is one of the most important lessons Holocaust education teaches us. The Holocaust did not emerge from nowhere. It emerged from the gradual weakening of democratic norms, civic responsibility, and moral accountability. And I think one of the questions every society must constantly ask itself is, what are we normalizing right now? And what are we becoming desensitized to? And what responsibilities do we have when we recognize warning signs around us? One of the biggest misconceptions about the Holocaust is that people imagine it began suddenly. But genocide is a process. Before mass murder came propaganda. Before concentration camps came exclusion. Before genocide came conspiracy theories, humiliation, discrimination, and the normalization of hatred. The Holocaust unfolded through stages, and it matters because societies do not usually leap directly into atrocity. People are conditioned gradually. That gradual conditioning is what makes moral courage so difficult because every step feels small enough to justify one compromise, one silence, one rationalization. The one moment of, this is not my problem, or it's probably not as bad as it looks. And I think this is one of the hardest truths about history. People often imagine they would immediately recognize danger. But history teaches us that human beings adapt remarkably quickly. And when change happens slowly enough, societies can normalize almost anything. That is why education matters, because it helps people recognize dangerous patterns before they become catastrophic. Dehumanization follows recognizable patterns. First, creation of fear. Then, blame a group for society's problems. Repeat that message constantly. Reduce complexity into emotionally charged slogans, convincing people that certain groups are dangerous, threatening, corrupting, controlling, weak, or less deserving of empathy. Then over time, exclusion begins to feeling acceptable. Then it's necessary, and then it's justified. And one of the things that deeply concerns me today is how quickly misinformation spreads through the digital ecosystems. Propaganda no longer arrives only through governments or newspapers. It spreads through algorithms, through influencers, through emotionally charged content, through repetition, through outrage. And what makes this especially dangerous in this is that emotional reaction often replaces critical thinking. People stop asking, is this true? And instead they begin asking, does this confirm what I already feel? One of the most important responsibilities we have at Holocaust Museum Boston will be teaching people how to recognize manipulation in real time, especially young people, because propaganda evolves, it adapts, and it modernizes, but the emotional mechanics behind it remains remarkably similar. I think one of the most uncomfortable truths about history is this: most people are not monsters. Most people are ordinary, and most people who remain silent do not think of themselves as bad people. They are afraid, they are overwhelmed, and they want to protect themselves and their families, and they do not want conflict. They just want to fit in. And silence often comes from fear, not cruelty. But silence still has consequences. And one of the questions I wrestle with constantly is, what causes some people to speak up while others stay silent? Because moral courage is not automatic. It must be built, strengthened, practiced. And I think one of the reasons Holocaust education matters so profoundly is because it forces us to examine ourselves honestly, not just examining historical figures, examining ourselves. Would we speak up? Would we challenge dehumanization? Would we risk social discomfort? Would we defend someone being targeted? Or would we convince ourselves that staying silent is easier? History becomes much more uncomfortable when we stop asking, how could they? And start asking, what would I do? One of the thinkers who has influenced my own thinking around what we're building and what we're thinking within this museum is Dara Horn. And I'm not sure many of you have heard of her. And one of the critiques she raises is that Holocaust education sometimes unintentionally reduces Jewish people into symbols of victimhood instead of fully human beings with rich lives, cultures, identity, and, let's be honest, complexity. She also challenges the idea that simply exposing people to Holocaust history automatically creates empathy or prevents hatred. And we spent a lot of time taking Dara Horn very seriously. And I think those critiques that she makes are very important. Because if Holocaust education became only about death and suffering or historical facts detached from human behavior, we risk people leaving emotionally overwhelmed, but unchanged. What we are trying to do differently at Holocaust Museum Boston is create an experience rooted not only in memory, but in human responsibility. We want visitors thinking critically, not passively. We want them recognizing how propaganda works, how misinformation spreads, how democratic erosion happens gradually, how dehumanization become normalized. And importantly, we want visitors to encounter Jewish life not only through tragedy, but through humanity, culture, family, identity, humor, resilience, community, intellectual life. Because Jewish people did not begin with the Holocaust, and Jewish identity cannot be reduced to victimhood. We also believe visitors need space for reflection and self-examination. Not simply what happened, but what does this ask of me now? That shift is incredibly important to me, to our museum, because we do not believe museums should simply preserve history. We believe museums should help society think more deeply about the present. I want to share, if any of you have not seen what the museum is going to look like, I threw this slide in. And, you know, as you hear me speak and you see our tagline on this slide, we really want to make sure that we are not just examining the past in hopes to create a better future. We want to examine the past and connect it to the present so that we can create a better future. People often ask me, why build a Holocaust museum right now? Surprisingly, I get that question a lot. And my answer is because now is exactly when we need it. That should be enough said. Societies everywhere are struggling with truth, with trust, with division, with identity, and with democratic fragility. Young people are navigating a world shaped by algorithms, emotional manipulation, and constant information overload. Anti-Semitism does not emerge in isolation. It emerges inside larger ecosystems of fear, conspiracy, and dehumanization. And we need civic spaces where people can slow down, think critically, confront complexity, and reconnect humanity to public life today. We are not building a mausoleum to the past. We are building a civic institution, a space where visitors wrestle with difficult questions, a space that connects history to the present, a space that challenges visitors emotionally and intellectually, and a space that asks, what kind of society are we building, and what responsibilities do we have to one another? The location of this museum matters deeply. Holocaust Museum Boston sits across from the Freedom Trail with a powerful view of the State House, and that placement is intentional because the museum is meant to exist in conversation with democracy itself, and there is a window up inside the introductory gallery that has a very powerful view of the State House and of the Freedom Trail, and we're using that as part of our exhibit. Boston is a city deeply connected to ideas about liberty, protest, citizenship, and civic responsibility. And we want our visitors leaving the museum not only thinking about history, but thinking about themselves, their choices, their responsibilities, their role in shaping society. The museum experience is immersive and deeply human-centered. Visitors will encounter personal testimony, interactive media, propaganda analysis, and questions about moral decision making. But importantly, visitors will not simply be told what to think. They will be asked difficult questions, questions without easy answers, questions that force self-reflection. The museum experience is intentionally layered: emotional, intellectual, interactive, and reflective. Some moments are deeply personal and human. Others challenge visitors to recognize manipulation, as I said, in real time. Others ask visitors to wrestle with ethical ambiguity and civic responsibility. And throughout the experience, we are constantly asking, how does history connect to the world visitors are walking back into when they leave the building? Because if Holocaust education remains trapped entirely in the past, we will lose its urgency. We talk a lot about moral courage. Moral courage means doing what is right, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it's unpopular, even when is social risk, even when there is a personal cost. And importantly, moral courage does not require perfection. It requires action. We often imagine courage as something dramatic, but many acts of courage are actually very silent. A teacher challenging hate in a classroom, a student refusing to laugh along, a journalist defending truth, a neighbor refusing to dehumanize another human being, a friend interrupting conspiracy-driven rhetoric. History teaches us that ordinary courage matters enormously. When we study Holocaust history, we often focus on extraordinarily evil. But I also think it's important to focus on extraordinarily humanity. People like, and I'm sure you'll recognize some of these names, Sophie Scholl, young university student who passed out pamphlets against the Nazi regime, knowing it could cost her life, and it did. She was beheaded. Or Miep Geiss, who saved Anne Frank, put her own life at risk to hide a family. Or Chihune Sugihara, who was a Japanese diplomat who signed as many visas as he could against his government, knowing it would cost him his job. Those are just some of the people that you are going to directly hear from in such a high-tech way. I don't want to give too much away. That you will be meeting and hearing from in the museum. But what we let the visitor know is these people were not superheroes. They were ordinary human beings making very difficult choices. And what matters most is not whether we believe we would have been heroes. None of us truly know that. The most important question is, Are we building the courage to act ethically in our own moment? Because every generation faces moral test. They simply just look different. And one of the reasons I care so deeply about Holocaust education is it because it reminds us that ordinary individuals matter. Human beings shape history every day through what they tolerate, ignore, defend, or protect. I spend a lot of time thinking about young people, and we really do so within our organization as we're building the museum. We've worked with our youth group and other types of visitor testing outsourced and working with young people. They are growing up in an incredibly complicated environment today. An environment shaped, as I said, by algorithms, outrage, misinformation, social pressure, identity conflict, and emotional overload. But I also believe this generation is deeply thoughtful. I so much enjoy being able to work with them as we examine our exhibits and put them through testing. This generation, they are searching for meaning. They're searching for truth. They're searching for authenticity. And they are definitely searching for purpose. And I think one of our responsibilities as educators and institutions is helping young people develop the tools to think critically, ethically, and courageously, not simply emotionally. That part of building democratic, that is what is part of building democratic resilience. Despite everything I have shared today, I am actually hopeful. Not blindly optimistic, but hopeful. Because I see people asking difficult questions. I see educators doing extraordinarily work. I see communities willing to have uncomfortable conversations, especially here in Massachusetts. We're so fortunate to live here. I see students deeply engaged. I see people searching for ways to reconnect humanity to public life. Hope is not pretending problems do not exist. Hope is choosing to remain engaged despite them. And I believe moral courage grows when people feel connected to something larger than themselves. This is my last slide, and I really thought about this one and, and what question I wanted to leave you with. What kind of society are we all building together? Because the future is not guaranteed. Democracy is not guaranteed. Human dignity is not guaranteed. These things survive only when ordinary people choose to protect them. History teaches us what human beings are capable of at our worst. But it also teaches us that we are capable of at our best. And ultimately, moral courage is not someone else's responsibility. Moral courage belongs to each and every one of us. And I want to thank you all for listening. And I know broke a little early, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions. I wanted to make sure we got all those questions in. And not to put her on the spot, but I asked the director of education to be on this call. So some questions we can direct to her as well. Um, Laura, I don't know how I'm going to stop sharing my
Yeah.
screen. Make sure
So
I'm.
I'm going to just share the two questions that we have here in the chat, and then I will open it up to, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question or put your hand up, we can call on you, whichever makes the best. But the two questions I see right now are, has the city of Boston been supportive? And secondly, how does this museum differ from the national one in DC? Now, that was a little bit ago, so I'm not sure if this kind of was answered or not, but I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, so the city of Boston has been very, very supportive. Um, and also at a state level, if any of you haven't heard yet, I'm really happy to continue to always share that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, both the Senate and the House came together, something they have not done before. They came together to award us a total of $10 million dollars pretty early on in the project, before the building was even starting to be erected. So we were really happy about that. The city has been very, very supportive, not only from an education standpoint, a museum standpoint, but even really being partners as we're building on. If anybody hasn't been to that area, it is one of the tightest areas in all of Boston to build in, and with a public transportation underground, with a train, it's been really difficult, and they have really, really stepped up. The city of Boston has challenged us, and I welcomed their challenges when we were designing the building, and I'm glad they did. I think the building, turned out to be beautiful, and we're really happy with that. And if some of you from when I had the slide and you haven't seen the building before, the rail car is exposed to the public view. And what the public is going to see is the visitor actually walking onto that rail from outside on the Freedom Trail, walking on that rail car, but not exiting. And what we're planning to do is work with the city on putting a QR code across the way, on the corner of Park Street and Tremont Street, so that people can then learn about the history of the rail car and dig a little deeper from the outside. And we're also beyond the city is we're working with meetboston.com and all the other institutions along the Freedom Trail. They've all been great partners with us. So we've been really, really, happy, and we've been really been welcome into the city and beyond. And I don't remember right now, Laura, the second question. If you can just repeat that.
Sure. It was, and then afterwards, Sheila and Lauren, I see your hands up. So what's the difference between this and the one in Washington, D.C., which I think.
Okay. I could touch a little bit. I mean, I spoke a little bit, but let me touch
Yeah.
just a little bit more. So, first, as you heard me talk about, is we're building a museum about moral choices, not only like chronological order, not just examining the past. The museum in Washington, they powerfully document what happened. What we're doing here in Boston is we're asking the questions of how did ordinary societies get there? What happens when democracy weakens? How does propaganda spread? How do neighbors become silent? And what is our responsibility today? The visitor is not standing outside the story as an observer. They're being asked to examine themselves as well. So as a, the other thing that I had mentioned is, we're intentionally connecting Holocaust history to the world people are living in now. Um, Without
Great.
politicizing the experience, we are going, the museum will directly engage in, as I mentioned, things like propaganda, misinformation, algorithms, conspiracy theory, and dehumanization, and the fragility of democratic norms.
Great. Sheila, talk. Yeah, Sheila. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. I think this is wonderful. My husband and I just came back from a week in Budapest and a week in Berlin, and it was very striking. I actually was very familiar with Holocaust history for many years, but it was very striking the similarities of the propaganda that the Germans used to build their Reich from the time of 1933, and what's going on today in the United States. So it's very scary. And I'm glad that you're talking about moral courage in the museum. I hope that people are left with something that, like, my dilemma always when I come back, is how do we engage? How do we do something to prevent that progression that you talked about and the degradation of democracy? So I hope people are left at the end of the museum experience with maybe concrete, not necessarily concrete suggestions, but ideas of what they can do and how they can participate regardless of their age. And thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to say yes. So the one word, and I agree with everything you're saying, but it's the word participate, right? That's one of the things that in the museum will not end. Most museums, if you've been to most of the Holocaust museums, the majority that, at least that we have gone through, they don't just end at liberation and then it's like DP camps, and then it's life after. We don't just end there. We actually have one more gallery that really talks about participation. So that is all the stuff that we are thinking about. So we don't want the museum just to end after we've brought you through it. We want the museum to go beyond just the walls of the building. And we are working that. We do have, I'm very proud of what we as a team put together for that last exhibit. And that is also the question that I also get is what's going to make us different. It's not just that we're asking these questions throughout. We don't save all of that to the interactors or throughout learning about propaganda and being asked these, critical thinking these questions. But at the end is really where the visitor will have that opportunity to dig deeper on what do I do? Where do I go from here? So we've already thought about that, and I'm really excited when we open to share that with everyone.
Lauren Kessler.
Yes. Thank you for sharing this. It sounds amazing. Just curious, when is it going to open to the public? And I think you gave a very compelling presentation, and just wondering how people in the audience can help support this initiative.
Excellent. Thank you. Great question. So as we all know, this was a rough winter, and at the point, I will be as transparent as I can be because I still don't have the answers yet myself. I'm still waiting. We're going through a major evaluation. So we were initially scheduled to open the end of this year. We were on target. I mean, we stayed on target, and then the winter hit. And the things that we needed to do with pouring concrete, we couldn't do because the concrete plants shut down. We needed the temperature to stay above 20 degrees. And if we count the days we lost inside, and they were able to do other things, but to do fireproofing and laying concrete, we lost 31 days. We're looking to see how we can buy back that time. And the contractors are working with our owners reps right now. And we plan to put out an announcement either the last week in May or the first week in June as to exactly what the closer date or month will be. But I will say it looks like it's going to be early in the first quarter, if I had to make a guess, but we will be doing a soft opening before we do a full opening to the public, which is what most museums, building from the ground up are doing. And even when you do an addition, right, you just want to make sure that everything is working correctly, the visitors are getting the experience they want. And so the second question is how can the community help? So first, I will say, we're out in a capital campaign, and so every dollar, small or large, helps get us to where we need to be and push the project along. The other thing is we will be looking for volunteers. We really want this museum. I always say, this is not our museum. This is our museum. So this museum is for everyone. And if you go to our website, and I don't know, Katie, if there's a chat, if you can see it, and my assistant's, I think, on here. But Laura, I think you said you're going to follow up. What I'll do is I can add the website and our info email page to, there she goes. Katie just put something in there, and our email address, but I'll still put it on. I know Laura had asked if I would send her the slideshow presentation, but I can make sure she has that information, the information, how to get in touch with us, and get that out to all of you.
Perfect. Lee, and then I know there's several questions in the chat. I will get to those as well. But Lee? Yeah.
Thanks so much for your time today, Jody. I'm a executive director of a small synagogue in Metro West, and we align really well with your comments regarding the responsibility of Holocaust education and building a community with moral character. And would love to know, how can I align and collaborate and really partner with HLF and the Holocaust Museum?
Great question. So what I would do is, so I've been going around and, and speaking at the different synagogues. I've been speaking at the different local churches and some other institutions. And then, so we've been starting there. And it's also, what type of, I guess the questions would be, what type of partnership are people looking for? Is it that they're looking more from us? I mean, we have a director of education is on board. And really, if you're looking for us to come and do a program there beyond just saying, hey, here's the museum coming, we want to be out there. We want to make sure the awareness is there and the education pieces are out there as well. So we would be, again, if you want to reach out to the info page, I would be more than happy to share, that we could share all that with you.
That would be great. Thank you so much, Jody.
I should say before we start with all the other questions that I definitely have here, we will be sending out the slides as Jody just mentioned, and we will also be sending out this recording of this whole GROW program. So there'll be a lot of that information that will come to you probably tomorrow. And I'm going to throw in there before I do the questions is with Tamid and the adult learning, we always also have a lot of programs that might answer some questions, or if there's something that you really are thinking would be a great program, please let us know as well, because we want to work together as well. All right, so will the educational programs be appropriate for young children?
I love that question. Yes, we can never teach the Holocaust too early. So yes, will we have an 8-year-old coming into the building, not through the building? The answer is yes. They're not going to get the same Holocaust education as you heard me talk about. Our director of education is already talking about family days. We purposely placed a classroom in the lower level with set up for with a sink so that we could do artwork with the younger students. Because when we think about, the word Holocaust, and you sit and say, what are the lessons, right? And when we think of one simple word, right? If you're working with a younger student, is the word kindness. We cannot teach kindness. We could teach kindness at any age. We could teach it to a 2-year-old. So we are planning on educating much younger students, but in a different way without bringing them through the museum. And then as they go through their education, as they get into their middle school and high school years, then the education will just change every year. It will get deeper and deeper.
Great. How are you promoting, and this is a couple people sort of asked this, is how are you promoting your focus so that people don't think it's just a Holocaust museum? Because, the title is Holocaust Museum of Boston, but so how are you going to promote it that it's more of today's world?
Yeah, so that, like I said, I've been going out. I've been doing a lot of speaking engagements. We have a newsletter. If you haven't signed up and you go to our website, which Laura will send all that out, you can sign up for our newsletter, and that's how we've also been promoting it as well. I know it's interesting. We talk about like, someone says, "Oh, I haven't heard of the museum," and I think, "Oh, we've been in the newspaper, we've been in the news," and I think, "Oh, wow, I don't even have cable TV anymore." I miss having a newspaper. And what we're finding also, and this is one of the things that we are going to be teaching in the museum is, where are people getting their news, right? People are getting their news, and I always used to say, we are, on Twitter, but we're like beyond that. Now what we're hearing in the studies is that young people are getting their news on ChatGPT. It's easier to go on and ask a question, what's going on in the world today. But we're out there, and like I said, we're coming to, going to different synagogues, different institutions. We'd be more than happy. But sign up for our newsletter, and that's definitely where you'll get that. But and we're getting the word out as much as we can, to all the different, to the different institutions. And we just hired our entire leadership team for the museum. So our director of marketing and communication is working on that strategic plan as we speak.
Perfect. Catherine, you're on mute though, Catherine. I think you put yourself back. There we go.
Other local institutions have sometimes referred to the transportation system as a problem for no parking. Instead, have you thought of making a lot of your welcoming advertising through the T? Because it's the way to get to downtown Boston. And people who live by parking have no idea that you could take public transportation.
Yes. So our website, we're in the middle of designing a new website, and for the museum, and that will all be on the website. About all the different ways to get to us will be on the website. And I saw one question that I want to touch on I quickly like skimmed through the chat. And one of the questions I thought was a great one, so I just want to talk about it just because I know we have 5 minutes. And one of the questions was, is the museum planning to connect with public schools, colleges, and universities? And the answer is absolutely. Education and community engagement are the core mission of Holocaust Museum Boston. So from the beginning, we have designed the museum not simply, like as a place for visitors to come through once, but as an ongoing education resource for students, educators, universities, law enforcement, politicians, medical professionals, and the broader community. We're already building relationships. Nikki, who is our director of education, she's already been in touch with DESE, which is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. She's already spoken on a panel for them. But we've already built relationships with public schools, the private schools, the colleges and universities, civic organizations, and the law enforcement and public service professionals. They're ready. They're ready for us to put programming together for them, you know, and why their jobs matter. When you think about it, right? It's not, and for us, even with teachers, it's not just about teaching the teachers how to teach the Holocaust. It's about teaching teachers what are their responsibility to their students. Because what's going on in the schools today, I it's and it's just so interesting that teachers are picking and choosing what they teach their students, and I hear that some of them are not doing critical thinking, and they're just, you know, they're able to just teach what they want to teach. So we just want to make sure that they understand they need to protect all of their students, and they really need, and that's the way they need to participate.
And the last question is, are there volunteer opportunities? I'm guessing through your website, you'll eventually
Absolutely,
have
yeah. So if you reach out to our info email page, and or if you go through the website, there's a place to put in a question. Then one of the staff will then send you a Google form to fill out, and then we're holding, so just so this way when somebody says a volunteer opportunity, some of the questions are, well, what is your background, like where would you best fit? And I'm sure the community would want to help us in the best possible way that they can. So it starts with a Google form, and so that's how we're doing that. And if you have trouble with the online Google form, Katie, who's one of our staff members who oversees that piece with the right now, handling the volunteer information forms, she will be more than happy to help you with that as well and set up a call.
Terrific. So I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you, Jody, for spending the last hour with us. I think it was really informative, and I hope that many of you will plan on visiting and being a part of this museum. I am certainly very excited to have it open, and I'm really excited also for you that this has come to fruition since 2018. So I'm really excited for you. I want to also just take a quick second to let you all know that we have one more grow, and it will be on June 10th when Rabbi Orr Rose and Reverend Rob Shank will speak about evangelical and Christian nationalism, an overview of America's dominant religious, social, and political force. That will be coming. The link, actually, I think Kim will be putting into the chat, and also the course catalog. Again, as I mentioned, we still have many classes that are going to be starting soon, and we have more. Obviously, the summer's a little bit less classes, but come the fall, we have many classes starting, and some of them are already there on the website. So with that, I just want to say thank you. And thank you all, to all of you for joining. And really, Jody, thank you. Thank you for bringing this museum to Boston. Thanks all.